'Tis the season for some color code.
This week I wanted to do something special and talk about 3 of my favorite white paint colors to use. So let's start with the color code CC-30 because not only am I dreaming of a white Christmas, I'm actually dreaming of an Oxford white Christmas. Please hit that like button to combat my bad joke insecurities, because I have them. Welcome back to the Paint People, everyone. So today is all about Oxford white, which is a Benjamin Moore paint color that I've talked about a lot in other videos, but I haven't really dedicated a video to it. And as you know, Color Code is the series where we break a color down, give you some color options for it, as well as a trim color. And considering we're already starting with something that's white, I get to be a little more creative with the trim and baseboard color by going with something just a bit darker, which is actually unusual for this show. Subscribe if you're new, and let's talk about today's color code of CC-30. Oxford White is part of the Designer Classics collection of colors by Benjamin Moore. These are all the colors that start with CC, like CC-40 Cloud White, CC-120 Stonehouse, and CC-140 Barely Beige, just to name a few. Oxford White is technically the third color of the whole collection, when you're counting from the very beginning, which follows Ultra White and Decorator's White respectively. Those three plus Cloud White are going to be probably the 4 most popular whites in the entire collection. And together they offer you a nice variety of some warm and cool variations of white. Now, if you've heard me talk about white paint colors, you know I'm not really too fond of calling something pure white when it's a paint color, because it just doesn't really exist. You can technically view them as very light off-whites that all have different undertones to varying degrees, but really they're light enough where in many circumstances they will feel white in person, especially in larger areas. Oxford White specifically has an LRV of 88.85, and LRV stands for light reflectance value, which is just a percentage from 0 to 100, representing how much light the color reflects. Oxford White's nearly 90 LRV makes it pretty bright, but not the very brightest paint out there either. Undertones-wise, you'll notice a real sense of balance with Oxford White, which is why it's one that I really do like using. It's not going to feel really stark or sterile or blue-leaning and fluorescent or even warm and creamy. If I had to put it one way or another, I would say Oxford White does favor the warm side ever so slightly, but it's really subconscious and toned down with just the smallest hint of gray present as well. It's closely related to its immediate neighbor, Decorator's White, and when you compare those two by side, you can really start to see that Decorator's White is much more gray leaning with an absence of any apparent warmth. This is part of the reason why Oxford White remains as one of my first choices for a white paint color for walls specifically. I painted an entire house with this color, both on the walls and the trim, and the overall look was spectacular. It just has this clean, simple, understated aesthetic when you use it throughout, and if we were doing the ceilings that day, I probably would have continued it up there as well, just because it strikes that fine line of clean but not empty feeling. I don't know how else to describe it. If you're curious to see what I mean, the best way to do that is to grab a mighty board, throw some paint on it, and test it out for yourself in a space that you're in. Just as a reminder to keep the painted mighty board away from your existing wall color so it doesn't skew those very delicate undertones in Oxford White. I like to place the mighty board right against a white frame or a door to give you a much more accurate representation. And if you need some more information on mighty boards, I'll leave it down below for you. So let's get into the fun part where we pick some colors that work well with Oxford White. Today, I have a light, medium, and dark color, as well as a trim color that for the first time in a while isn't an off-white. Well, some people may call it that, but I don't think so. Anyway, let's get to the light color first, and to no one's surprise, it's not quite as light as Oxford White, but still not going to feel dark at all. And the color is called Horizon OC53. I would say Horizon would count as a gray color, but it's pale and floaty, and it is one of my favorite clean slate grays that acts as a wonderful backdrop for a more contemporary color scheme. It has the slightest hint of green hiding in the background, which is more prevalent in north-facing rooms, but the slight warmth in Oxford White will help settle that down a little bit. That's why you have a really great pairing here. The LRV for Horizon is just under 74, so that's a great universally liked light reflectance value that introduces just enough color without feeling too aggressive. For the mid-tone color, I wanted to bring in a little more color hue, but still play within that realm of semi-neutral colors, and it's called Excalibur Gray 2118-50. I love how Benjamin Moore describes this color. They call it a romantic gray, a soft but assertive shade. I suppose if you looked at it on its own, it would seem like a darker gray color, but what you really get here is a shade of a periwinkle purple, so it sort of seems like a silvery purple gray, one that feels just a bit more crisp and cool when you introduce the bit of warmth that Oxford White has. This could be deemed as a subtle accent color, so even though it's a mid-tone, it's not going to feel overly neutral, but to me, it's absolutely beautiful. Let's be honest though, any bit of color next to Oxford White is going to feel pretty saturated, especially our dark color pairing, which is coming right up. Benjamin Moore describes it as a blackened gray. The final color is Nightfall, 1596. This is clearly capitalizing on that high contrast of black and white, but Oxford White isn't the brightest white out there, and Nightfall isn't necessarily even a black in my eyes. It's more of a slate gray, kind of a charcoal color. It also has some similarities to the color wrought iron, so it just feels like a tad more refined black and white color pairing when mixed with Oxford White. Nightfall doesn't have any strong undertones at all. It's quite plain, so it's not going to feel like a dark brown or a green tinged off black. It's pretty true to its dark gray roots. And finally, we have the trim color section. This is an interesting one because the main color we're talking about today is a pretty awesome trim color in its own right. I think Oxford White is fantastic on baseboards, doors, and trims. But like I said earlier, I do enjoy it as a wall color as well. So if you're using Oxford White on the walls, would it be a good idea to continue it onto the trim and woodwork? Sure. That's what I did on that old project I worked on, and it turned out wonderfully. But you don't necessarily need to stick to Oxford White if you don't want to. That doesn't mean go and find another white paint color, because you'll drive yourself crazy trying to find the perfect complementary white without clashing. I would instead go a bit darker and take a look at some of the off-white color collection by Benjamin Moore. And if you want some real noticeable contrast, you want to pick something with an LRV difference of about 30, give or take. And that would mean you'd be looking at colors under 60 LRV on the trim. But with Oxford White on the walls, I think it would be really nice and elegant if you have a more subtle difference in your trim color, maybe only a 10-point difference or so. The color that I found to work on the baseboards and trim would be OC26 Silver Satin. Like the name suggests, this is a silvery warm grayish that suits Oxford White beautifully. So much so that you wouldn't have any problems if you flip those two around and threw Silver Satin on the walls and Oxford White on the trim. Oh hey, looks like I have a Silver Satin color code episode right over here, if you want to learn more about it.